the World Cup became a line in the sand. Once we won the World Cup bid, we now had to prepare.
The challenge for South Africa in its preparation and its delivery of the event is clearly that we are a developing nation.
The World Cup is 2 years away, so there's a reasonable planning horizon for that.
There'll be much to celebrate when the FIFA World Cup kicks off in 2010. It'll be Africa's first and the fourth premier global sporting event put on by South Africa. The country has already staged rugby's equivalent, as well as cricket's 50 and 20 over tournaments. But football's showpiece presents far bigger challenges, not least of which is convincing the sport's custodians that South Africa can deliver a viable commercial product.
I think the World Cup was hosted outside the African continent for more than 100 years on the basis that there was a very strong argument that a World Cup anywhere on the African continent would lead to huge financial losses to FIFA and therefore would constitute a major risk.
The global economic slowdown certainly hasn't eased fears that hosting the event in Africa remains a major financial risk. Domestically, though, the World Cup is being touted as a fillip to a flagging South African economy and a means to avoid slipping into recession.
In spite of the fact that we have a difficult period worldwide now, we still are looking at the 3.5% growth. It focuses a program of revitalization of our cities, placing better infrastructure, more sophisticated banking and financial services, and those are the things that would be required to sustain economic growth.
The South African government has committed around $2.4 billion to the provision and upgrading of infrastructure. That includes the building of 5 new stadiums and massive improvements to the transport system. In the process, it hopes to create 160,000 jobs. And in a country suffering unemployment levels in excess of 30%, that alone will be considered a fair return on investment. Of far bigger consequence, though, is South Africa's planned total infrastructure spend of more than $80 billion over the next 5 years. The World Cup has provided the government with the motivation needed to begin that process sooner than might otherwise have been the case.
In terms of infrastructure spending, the direct spending on these stadia is a very small amount compared to what ultimately needed to be done in the country in terms of power stations and railways and road systems and ports.
Jordan believes that with 2 years still to go before kickoff, FIFA's decision to award the tournament to South Africa has already been vindicated.
We have generated more than $3 billion in revenue from commercial partners, from hospitality, from broadcast partners, and other programs that will come on stream. We'll see, I think, the total revenue of this World Cup beyond $3.5 billion, as opposed to the $2.8 billion from the German World Cup in 2006. And that $2.8 billion from Germany represent the highest revenue. And now we've exceeded that.
While those figures are sure to go down well at FIFA's headquarters in Zurich, the challenge remains persuading the South African public that the process is sustainable.
We essentially are in the process of doubling the size of the construction industry over a 5-6 year period. And after 2010, that construction industry will be fully occupied with the kind of infrastructure requirements we have for the very long term.
With so much at stake, it's little wonder that the South African government has moved to downplay the potential impact of the one issue that could determine the event's success or failure. The country is in the grip of a major energy crisis.
We've got contingencies in place. We've got agreements with major customers. That means that should things go wrong, we'll be able to reduce the demand for those major customers so that we can supply electricity to the rest of South Africa. And so that people that come to the 2010 World Cup can not only enjoy the soccer experience, but enjoy South Africa in its totality.
Another potential stumbling block is the threat of strike action by unions representing construction workers at the host stadiums. Their members downed tools at 2 sites last year, and a third strike delayed work at a stadium in February this year. But local organizers say the union's concerns have been addressed and that FIFA's construction deadlines won't be affected.